Oh, we are live. We are live on Facebook. Hello, family. Hello, warriors of light. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on episode 15. We're on episode 15 of this masterclass series that we have been doing since October, and we're completing this. We're left with two more episodes, and we would have completed the series for this season. And today we're here with Mkhulu Zola, sorry. Mkhulu Zola is here with us today. Welcome, Mkhulu.
Thank you, Coco. Thank you for having me on your show. We give thanks to all the warriors of light, and everyone that's watching. Marcos.
Mkhulu. And thank you everyone who's joining us here on Zoom. As usual, we have the chat to chat with us throughout as Mkhulu will be sharing his wisdom, his transmissions. And when it's time, 45 minutes into our conversation, we'll open Q&A. So you can use the Q&A option, which is different from the chat in your gadget, to ask your questions. And you, of course, you can ask the questions also throughout. So feel free to just drop them there, and we'll come to them at the end, towards the end, when it's the Q&A section. And also the same is true for those who are joining us on Facebook. Actually, let me check if we're actually live. I did not check. So say hello to us if you are watching from Facebook. Let us know that you're here. And yes. Greetings, everyone. Okay, we are good. We're good. We're live on Facebook. We're also live here. And today we are talking African holistic healthcare with Mkhulu, and this is going to be such an exciting, powerful, profound conversation. This is what Mkhulu promised me. So keep being with us. And before we jump in, we begin with a grounding meditation to open our sacred space. So wherever you are, taking this time to close your eyes and allow yourself to come to the stillness that is you, that is within your higher heart center. Becoming aware of your feet in the ground, if you have your feet in the ground, and coming into the center, your higher heart center, taking a deep breath as you return to the space. Becoming aware of the permanent diamond seed, your essence that's residing in that center. You may see as a diamond, a blue light diamond, filled with the liquid light of your spirit, of your essence. Allow yourself to connect with that. And allow this energy to begin to move, radiate through all of your bodies and beginning to move down to the lower chakras, to your solar plexus, the sacral center, the root. Begin to see this like a grounding cord going down between the legs into the earth, like a root of a tree. Seeing this root moving past your earth star, the star that connects you with Mother Earth, with Mom, Wenty, Gaia, Nala, Tara, whatever you want to call her. And allowing the grounding cord to go all the way to the crystalline core, to the womb of our earth, and allow yourself to connect with the womb of the mother, this living, breathing, vibrational field, and allow yourself to release all the energies of the day that you've been carrying to the mother, so the mother may transmute that for you with her unconditional love. And begin to receive from her core the diamond light, healing light. Begin to see that light coming back up through the same grounding cord, moving very quickly like a wave of water, the primordial sacred waters coming back up through the earth's thigh into your feet, into your blood, your bones, your DNA, beginning to cleanse all that is held in the blood and the DNA, quickening, moving fast through all the parts of your body, past the heart, all the way to the top of the head, your crown chakra, and opening up to your soul star, the star that connects you to your soul, and opening up all the way to the I am gateway, allowing yourself to open up to the great central sun, to the great heavens. As we open the sacred space by welcoming in our beloved Holy Mother, Father God, welcoming in the luminous ancestral helping spirits, the ancient ones, the grandmothers, the grandfathers that work with every one of us, those of light, welcoming in the council of our higher selves and our soul families here to support us with this transmission as we bless this sacred space with the holy light, holy grace, Holy Trinity, the Holy Spirit, and begin to receive that energy into the body. Take a deep breath in and out. And come to your heart again as you open your eyes. Welcome back to our sacred circle. And welcome also Mkhulu.
Thank you, Coco. That was amazing.
Yeah. Now I feel much lighter, grounded with the energies. And yes, so ready to jump into our conversation of African holistic healthcare, which is such a broad conversation, but perhaps beginning this transmission on a contemplation on holistic healing, holistic healthcare, what that is, why that is important when we are considering how to heal ourselves as African people.
Well, this is one of my favorite topics to discuss. I'll say this, African holistic healthcare, it's really about taking a holistic approach to health. So it's not just about trying to isolate. We live in a modern day society, which is very Western, which likes to focus on isolating things. So if you're sick, and what we're seeing in your sickness is that you're behaving in a certain way, your mind is, or you're making certain decisions. We want to isolate the problem to it being a mental illness. But then we don't want to factor in how does the body get involved in that? How does the environment get involved in that in terms of the people in the environment and the history and the present that's taking place? You know, so African, oh, and also when we say history, we talk about the spirits and the ancestors, but African holistic healthcare focuses on each area of one's life. So that part of an areas of a person's life, which is God and spirituality, that part of that person's life, which is family, social life, how you relate to your body and how you care to that for that body, your interpersonal, which is about your mental and emotional life, and then your life as it comes to your karma, so all the cause and effects of your life and the effects that they've created, which we experience it now, that area of one's life, and the area of one's life that relates to the ancestors because of that karma, and most importantly, how one relates to the nature. So we look at multiple areas of a person's life, and then we come to the answer by looking at this bigger picture instead of isolating it and having a small picture on the issue. So each field, would say complements the other and completes the whole system. We look at what happens to you in the stars, we look at what happens to you in what you say. So yeah, I'd say that's in a nutshell, what is African holistic healthcare. But ultimately, it's about giving you a healthy expression, by creating harmony between all these different areas of a person's life. Of course.
Yeah. It's definitely about understanding that there's this interconnection with all aspects of our lives. We are interconnected as beings, and the human experience, the physical experience, is not derived from one singular experience. It's a multitude, multi-dimensions of things coming together to create you. So yeah, we can't look at disease, illnesses, whatever is not in harmony as one single thing, right? But for most people, that's where we start when we are having a conversation of, am I healthy? I feel like I am not healthy. We start with noticing what is not going well, what is out of harmony. And usually that's the physical manifestations, right? It's because I have a disease in the body, I have an illness in the body, or mentally. And that's where we start to feel like, oh, I need to take care of myself. I need to do something. And when we now start to say, oh, it's multidimensional, there's God, it can be very overwhelming. So let's take it from the perspective of, I'm at the beginning of my health, taking care of my health. I have a dis-ease, a disharmony in my life. What do I start with? Where do I go?
So, like with all disease, the moment that it appears, it's just a manifestation of something that started long time ago, and I'd say always it starts with, where are you coming from? We can't look at just the present and where we're going. We have to actually understand where we're coming from, and what patterns have we been living that created the illness in the first place. So let's just say, for example, let me just say this. I keep saying a human being has different parts. One part of them is God, that's the spirit, right? And then there's the one part, the next part is the natural laws, cause and effect and vibration and movement. The next thing after that is the nature, because when all these natural laws work together, they create nature. Then it's the ancestors, then it's yourself, right? So in these spaces right here, particularly this one called natural laws, cause and effect. Let's just focus on that one. We grow up in a home, right, raised by people, right, and that's cause and effect. That however they raise you tomorrow, that's how you're going to carry yourself out in life and in society. How they treat you in love is how you're going to treat everyone in love. How they treat you when it comes to competing, that's how you're going to treat everyone. How they treat you when it comes to having morality, that's how you're going to treat the world, because people only do what they know. And in there we see cause and effect, right? So let's talk about a person that would have like lung cancer, for example. Let's use that example, as a disease to make this hit home. This person, first and foremost, if we understand what the lungs are about, the lungs are the organs that hold the energy of sadness, depression, grief, right? And the opposites of those. So that's what the lungs can do. The emotions of those specific emotions will be held by your lungs. So let's say something happens in the family, some great loss that affects everyone in the family, someone who is very important and crucial in that family passes away, and what happens then is they have to bury, but people can't get along. So no one wants to grieve. People have too much pride. No one wants to grieve and work with one another. What you start to find happening to those people is the people's chests start to close up. They start to develop illnesses within their chest because that's where they're holding the grief, right? It'll manifest in different ways. Sometimes it'll be flus and sometimes fevers. Others will be having asthmas. Others will get corona. Others will pick up smoking. And others, will always feel like when it's time to speak in their power that, they can't, they get closed up. When you look at how they live then, because we're saying cause and effect, and what was it that they were taught in their homes? They taught diets that are acidic, right? Very same diets which congest the lungs. And if you look at this thing of comfort eating, people eat a lot of food that first, before it congests in any other area. When we say we comfort eat, the first organs that get affected are the lungs. Lungs take it on because it has to go past the esophagus, go down, and if you're eating acidic foods, that immediately inflames the tissue in that area, right? So you start to feel congestion, and many of us don't cleanse. In the very same way, that very same family doesn't want to grieve, doesn't want to cleanse the emotion that is being held by those specific organs for them, right? Then they supplement it also with the very same things that were the lifestyle diet that they were taught at home, which is the same thing of not wanting to grieve, not wanting to deal with the issues. When we say everything is interrelated, right? We're going back to the thing, because they don't want to respect cause, there has an effect. Everyone has pride, everyone has their own opinion, some are scared, some have tried. But if we don't come back into practicing what is actually healthy and what is needed, and dealing and confronting the issues in the life and making the changes in the lifestyle, while the cycles continue. So obviously then, a person would end up at a healer, and then the healer would have to divine what happened. What happened between them, that's causing this sadness in the family. And it would go back to that point, when this person passed away, the family didn't get together, and then you'll find that even because they went together, the rites of passages of how to bury their loved one weren't performed properly. Certain people who were supposed to be involved weren't involved and invited, and as a result, sadness, the sadness and the mountain sadness over years that just doesn't pass, and it keeps going on and on and on and on. That person would tell, no, it's this, and that. And then we'd have to administer appropriate medicine for it. One part of that medicine would have to be that rite of passage. The other part of the medicine would have to be telling these people to get back into cleansing and detoxing their bodies, watching what they're eating as they are eating for their genome, their type, instead of just being careless about it, looking at the grief and forgiving, and confronting whatever it is, and the beauty of the body, like I say, each organ. So we talked about the lungs hold that, the liver holds anger, your kidneys hold your willpower, your stomach holds worry and anxiety, each one of these organs, whenever you have an area on whatever, on any area of your life with one of these emotions, that is the organ that's going to be affected, and that's the organ we'll tend to abuse. For example, if you are very self-critical of yourself, you'll abuse your mind. You will abuse your mind. You'll work it to points where it's not supposed to be working in. For example, people who work 12 hours, and it's not like they're doing 12 hours of amazing creative new things, 12 hours of monotonous work, because of the fact that they don't believe they're good enough, and that's why I say it's like then again, there'd be a story of where did that person learn that they're not good enough. It goes back into the family, the intergenerational issues of how they keep doing that to each other, the 100% issue in society, which is narcissism, and it goes on and on and on and on like that, because people, if they're not taught how to soothe in their upbringing, will go and look for an outlet, and if they grew up watching people using destructive soothing tools such as alcohol or be fighting or whatever it is, that's what they'll become when they're older, when it's time to soothe. You know, so it's a vicious cycle. You know, it's a vicious cycle until one brings in an understanding of, okay, what is health? You know, apart from what my family was able to teach me, because they could only teach me what they know. You know, what is health beyond that? And of course, and then looking at all the areas of your life as a person.
Yeah. So many good points. I don't know where to begin, which part to, yeah, to take in. But absolutely love this whole expansion of understanding how we're creating illnesses. And so 3 things I want us to look into: the natural laws, the rite of passages, and the ways now to begin to like cleanse and properly soothe the nervous system, and the DNA in ways that will promote health, right? So the first thing that you're speaking about is the natural laws, which I absolutely love. It's uh, the divine universal logos, you know, the ways that things were meant to be. We were all meant to experience abundance. We were all meant to experience well-being, connection with other people, love, family, all these things. That's what we mean by natural laws. And so when we are not experiencing this, we are now outside natural laws. We are in a distortion and inverted upside down world, which is actually our current world as we know it now, because we are not all feeding, particularly as Africa, we're not experiencing the natural laws, right, in our homes and so forth. So as you were describing all the ways that we can create illnesses, I'm here thinking this means everyone is going to do this because we do not have the natural laws active, and we do not also have the rite of passage currently being implemented or being utilized in our communities. So can you expand more on the natural laws, and also what are the rite of passages that we are actually supposed to go through in event that we are experiencing the inverted natural laws?
So I'll just say, like, I'll just talk about a few of them because there's so many. You just have to keep observing life. So for me, I'll just say this: natural laws, you know, are the things that in life that no one can change. No one. No one, no religion, no culture, no spiritual being, nothing. Only God can set them in motion, and only God can end them. You know, so those are like the natural laws. But like I say again, what's the makeup of the reality that we experience and we see? You know, so like we said, cause and effect. I'll just use the example of like exercise. We know that if we exercise and eat well, the effect that is we're gonna eat, feel well, all right? For let's use another one, the law of movement and vibration, that all things move. You know, life is an active moving thing, all right? So if we're exercising, we're moving, right? We're moving our gut, our organs in their rhythm, right? There's no congestion, there's a flow, movement, right? That's another law of its own, that everything must flow as there's movement. You know, that if we then don't exercise and move waste through our bodies and anything, then naturally we're going to have congestion. And then when we have congestion, we have the law of decay, right? Starting to settle in, you know, because the nutrition that's supposed to get to the cell doesn't get there. Usually it looks like plaque, you know, sometimes it looks like mucus directly, you know, sometimes it's lymphatic fluids, you know, like pus, you know, in the body. You know, and these things clog up your blood, clog up your lymph, nothing gets there. So even if you're eating and you don't even get to nutrition getting to the place it needs to get, law of decay, so it's simply put. And if the law of decay is not addressed, you know, that all things going into a state of putrefaction will decay. All things that have come to the end of movement begin to decay. If that is not sorted out, well, we get the law of death, that all things must perish eventually, you know, and it's practical. The natural laws are not things that you need theories about. It's things you have to observe, and you just have to respect that in life it's like this, that there's that, and then there's that, and there's that, this, there's that. For example, you know, if we don't respect the law of migration, you know, that in certain seasons, you have to migrate to warmer environments. What ends up happening, or the correct environment, whatever ends up happening is you're stuck in an environment where your food for your body type and your genome, your expression is not available. Because in winter, not many things grow. And that's the reason why we have other races, because they didn't respect the law of migration, for example. And in there, because they didn't respect the law of migration, the law of mutation took place, that they mutated into a whole new different race, 2, 3 different races, and that's what I'm trying to say. You violate a natural law, and then the law of mutation takes place because it becomes like an abnormality. And nature already works in its system and it's committed to it. It's continuously, perpetually moving in its rhythm. So for example, now we talk about our rites of passages, and the whole point of rites of passages, especially the ones where we're talking about when a person is now conscious, going forward, were to put a person in a space of observation. That's why we only perform the earlier ones, for the child when the child is conscious. So I'll say the first ones have to do around what happens when a child is born. Now, there's no one size fits all, and this is where family history is important, and knowing where you come from, what's your culture, what's your tradition, because each tribe, each tradition, each culture does it differently, but it's all under one human culture, right? Because there was only one race on earth in the beginning, African. So any other knowledge system that's out there in the world started from one place, and people left here with that. So whether it's knowledge on what herbs you use in the rite of passage, whether it's knowledge on where do you go for that rite of passage, whether it's knowledge on what processes must be done in the middle, it was all one system. But because people moved to different environments, right? There's different plants in different environments. So the plants you usually use for your rite of passage, you go to somewhere else where it's not there. So now you have to improvise. And it's not even improvising, you have to develop, because they committed to moving into a new environment. So they have to now develop their indigenous system to be reflective of the environment. We are natural creatures that exist within an environment, and we have to keep the balance of that environment. But anyway, when a child is born, there are rites of passage that must be done that usually pertain, especially for what happens with the mom before the child is born. What happens with the family in terms of sorting out if the people are having the child out of wedlock, sorting out those issues, for example, because there's an issue that we see very normal. People have children and then they want to keep it from their families as if they're not joining the bloodlines of their families together, and as if the ancestors of both groups will not exist in that one being. So usually the rites of passage around pregnancy, before pregnancy, usually are about bringing the family groups together, because you fusing blood. So usually people would be married, we're hoping, right? And if not, what would be happening is people would be hoping, that they're getting married, they are committed to each other, but it's not like that in the world. Every possibility happens, and all of it is meant to happen. It's not supposed to be one way, but the whole point is to bring the family groups together, to be like, okay, guys, our children are pregnant now. So who is taking responsibility for the rites of passages going into the future? This is where things of like lobola for the children, for the child who's to be born, is discussed. So are the two parents going to marry each other? So the two marrying partners, they become one. So if they were both virgins and they made a mistake, there'd have to be damages because one brought their shame to the other's home. And male brought shame to the female's home. That'd be one thing. It'd be this discussion. Are you guys getting married now? Damages and lobola would be two different things. They'd be like, are you getting married? No, we're not getting married. Okay, you're not getting married. Are you guys going to lobola the child? So the child's underneath the father's lineage, and then the father is responsible for performing those rites of passage. From all of them, from the ones that happen when the child turns 7 years old, when they're conscious of themselves, the ones when they turn 11 years old, when they hit puberty, the ones when they reach adolescence and start young adulthood around 18, and going forward, the father side of the family would be responsible. If the father side of the family is like, no, we're not loboling the child and we're just paying damages, then the mother side of the family would always be responsible for what happens at 7 years old. When the child becomes conscious of themselves, 11 years old, when the child's first cycle of intelligence happens, and they've reached puberty for the first time, and at young adulthood, when they're now stepping into adulthood. So the whole point of these things, like I was saying, going back to where we started, was to put the children, in a space of observation. So after discussing all of these things, the two children who are now pregnant, the two who decided we're going to have a baby, then each one would have to now go to their elders, boy to his uncles, to the girl to his grandmothers, and go and be taught what needs to be taught about where they're going, in terms of what you need to eat, what you need to avoid, in terms of some things we can say are superstitious and whatnot. It's not superstitious, it's really about paying attention to the fact that you've got a living being inside of you who's conscious. So they both, the parents would be taken aside and would be given minor coaching. When the child would be born, different cultures, different things. Some people, for the first 30 days, the husband cannot see, the father can't see the mother and the child. In some traditions, the mother, the child, and the father must be left alone, to themselves to bond. In some traditions, so there's always, in some traditions, it's a whole thing where the family comes and the eldest person in the family comes, and cleanses that child with the medicines of that family's home and performs the rites of passage. And that's why I said there's no one size fits all when it comes to rites of passage. It's like what is done in your tradition. But the whole thing that I can say at the beginning there, the whole thing is you want to receive the child, you want to bring in the elders into the situation, you want to cleanse the child and introduce the child to the rest of the family that's present, but most importantly to the ancestral group, because we have received, someone that was sent from the other side. It would be in this time that usually the person who, different cultures, different things, the person who is given the task, there's usually always that one person in the family, who will have the task chosen by their ancestors to get the names for that child, for a child. Now that child's name is this. I dreamt this person came to me and said this child's name is this. So those type of things. So if that child's being named after another ancestor, that is known, then there'd be a rite of passage that must be performed where the parents must go and go to where the child comes, where the ancestor who the child's being named after, and ask that please don't bother them, child, and can you just give this child this name, and then we acknowledge that the dream came through that person saying these things, and. So there's a variety, like I really mean it, for all the different things. Why? Because in that situation of the child, carrying another person's name, it's you being called the exact same thing, same name, same surname, exact same as another person. So and you've also got that person's blood. So through the use of word power, you're invoking those parts of your DNA, because thought programs the cell and the DNA. So in the very same way, that's how you trigger DNA, through using the powers of the psyche, not psyche as in the mind alone, but the heightened senses too of the mind, But anyway, because we respect that causes effect, that if we don't fix this cause of naming a child, this ancestor will start, and this ancestor's traumas and unfinished things will start living out through this child, because they will invoke it into their reality. It's just respect and cause and effect them, and then the habits of that person too will start to live out through that person. That's 7 years old. Again, 7 years old, you have to do, most people do it at this time. Most tribes around the world do it around this time. My culture, we call it imbelego. The whole point of it's always done, I say at this time 7, because you're conscious now, that you're an individual and you can actually remember that you have memory. There's a time when you're growing up, you don't actually realize you have memory. It's just everything's happening. By the time you reach your first cycle of, you realize you have memory, and your identity is some part of this memory, the memory that you've had since you were born up until now. And the thing is, at that point, the person can reason. And that's the most important thing, that they can see that, okay, that's what's happening, and that's happening, and that's happening, and that one did that, and that one did that, and that one did that. And it was like this type of celebration. And these were the people that were present. The whole thing is to get it into you. We'll explain it to you later on, but for you to be able to see it and remember that there is such a thing, and it's done in such a way. And the whole point of that would be to take the child now and to introduce the child to the ancestral group, spiritually, and it's done in different ways, different cultures. At 11, when I say a person reaches puberty, that's when now the teachers in nature, learning how what happens with the birds, what happens with the animals, what happens with the plants, would start happening. Why? Because psychology, and behavior in Africa is learned from observing animals. Even if, let's just talk about African insults, for example, where they describe a person as an animal. For example, a promiscuous man or woman is always called a dog, because a dog, when it's on heat, can't control its impulses. So a promiscuous person cannot control the impulse of having sex. We say it, for another example, like I'd say, a parent that leaves their child at birth, we call that person a snake. Why? Because only a snake leaves its eggs. When the eggs are about to hatch, it leaves, and it doesn't tend to the babies. All behavior and psychology in an African context learned from observing the animals, observing the nature, how trees grow, how water flows, how earthquakes happen if you're in an environment. It's observing all the nature. And in there, that's what the child is. That's why many boys are taken aside and made shepherds, at young ages, go out there. And in the Western world, they make the children do scouts. Everyone must be a scout, and they go out into the nature, because that's the only way, you can actually see how do two people who have the same thing, like when you see two lions fight, they fight hard, but they don't fight to kill each other. So you learn, if I'm going to fight, how to go into conflict, what stance should I have. You also get to see how different parts of life feed into other parts of life, and how life is a whole connected system. So that's where at 11 years, it's not about making a big shift. It's about just, now the child's reached puberty. It's usually when the time girls are now having their first moon cycles, boys are having their first wet dreams, both now are fertile, and this is why we have to bring them out there, because when you're taking them out there, nature's a very calming and soothing place on one side, but two, they're also getting to see how wild and creatures that are not tamed by human tongue, they just are in their actual authentic nature. How to behave authentically whilst your hormones. You see, this creature also has hormones, and it's wild, right? Your hormones and what's happening with you is natural. So observe, just pay attention and observe how these creatures who are so true to their authentic nature, whether it's an elephant, whether it's a bird, whether it's a lizard, whether it's an insect, watch how they conduct themselves, so you can start to learn how to relate and be relatable in life. We show them what is poisonous in terms of foods. So what is foods that are actually edible, Why? Because you need to know how to hunt. So what can I use to hunt and put on an arrow to strike the animal so it's not too fast or it's weak enough for me to catch it, so I can perform the rites of passages of slaughtering it correctly. So because you have to perform death rites. Why? Because in Africa, everyone is a person. The tree is a person, all the different animals are people, all the insects are people. And if you were to kill a person, you'd have to perform, you'd be responsible for that family of that person, and making sure that death rites of passages for that person are performed. So if you kill an animal, you have to perform the rites of passage, the death rites properly. And children would be taught all of these things. They'd have that person that's with them, the elder shepherd, or if they were with person's a hunter, that person would be responsible for passing on that type of knowledge. That you can eat this. This medicine is very good for treating the animals because it affects their digestion like this. When you're learning how to treat different animals, you're also learning how your body works, because they also have stomachs. Maybe they have 2 or 3 more stomachs, but I'll say again, and they also have blood, and they also have hormones, and they also have arteries and veins and a lymph system. They have the same thing looking different, working a bit differently. right? So when you're busy treating animals, also you learning at how does the body work? How does the body work? How do you treat flatulence? For example, when now the stomach is bloated, and eats too much of something sweet or too much of something sour, now the stomach is bloated, there's flatulence there. How do you treat that? You would learn these things there because you know, I have to give this animal this type of, let me give it this type of medicine. I give it to it as something to drink or give it to it as an enema. It comes out. And in the very same way, later on in life, when you've gone to your adulthood there, if you are called for becoming a healer, all of these things you would have already gone through them unconsciously. You were just being a shepherd, but you weren't realizing you're being taught to be a healer, because you had to be healing animals. So then at that point, your skill is already advanced, because you've already treated other people who walk on fours, So at 18 again, now this is where you'd be taught about when you go to young adulthood, going to adulthood. This is where now we'd be focusing on your responsibility, getting you to be you yourself. One is you must be yourself. So that means you must be responsible. But there's always an issue. It's the trauma. So this time, young adulthood would start from 18 and end at 28. And it would be about addressing these three issues. When you're a child, you're free to do whatever you want. No one actually is like, everyone says, no, he's a child or she's a child. He's a child. But once you step beyond that space of being a child, well, things get real. Immediately real. You do something, people are like, wait, that you have to go fix that, right? Like, but when I was a child, I didn't have no, you're not a child no more. You must go and fix that. It's like, but why is it? No, it's not being mean. You have to take responsibility for your powers of creation. That through what you say and do, you are creating a situation, and those situations can be healthy or unhealthy. So it's about teaching a person the power of responsibility, and how with responsibility you can create the life that you want to live, and without it you can create a life that will destroy you and your family. So that's why the person will be taught then about how do you carry yourself as a man, as a woman. But in this, there'd be also herbs that are used. Every rite of passage has this medicines. I want you to know, and a diet and a cleansing protocol that is shown, but in this stage, you'd be put through processes. There'd be medicines which are very psychoactive in nature, that would be used, to help people go into themselves, and listen to their nature, go into themselves and deal with their trauma, right? And purge out all the excessive emotion that they've carried from when they were a child up to now, then adult. Purge out the hatred for their father, purge out the hatred for their mother. Understand them as just humans, just people who are having children, who had a child when they were children themselves, and putting it back into an understanding that another person, even no matter how much you love them, they are just themselves. They can come and go anytime. They don't know when they might leave. So it's to get the parents to understand that their parents are just people. But there's that love. You must have that love and respect. But then for a person to actually understand that the parents are just people, like they actually have to let go of the anger towards them, the resentment, all the unresolved issues, the fear. And then most of the time it's the fear. People can't live beyond their parents. They continue their parents' patterns, whether it's food wise, work wise, their choices and behaviors, and this is the thing, that whole 10-year gap is to get you to start dealing with those issues. So you don't run around blaming people and accusing people that people are doing this to you and that, because you haven't dealt with your own issues. When you haven't dealt with it, it's very easy to look for someone else or the situation to be wrong. But when you know yourself, you've gone inside, you've dealt with your issues, you know where your problems are, why they're coming, why the situation that's happening is happening, and what's your responsibility in it. And that's the whole point. It was to get people into that understanding. And in there, like I say, on one part, there's medicines that they teach you, that are to keep your body healthy, firm and strong, your hormones in balance and in check, and diets to do that. But a lot of the processes would involve you going in and understanding your nature, understanding yourself in relation to God, like we said, into relation to the natural laws, really observing now, how do you, because no longer, now you're an adult, you're no longer a child, you're now an adult, you're no longer a child. So how do you now really relate to the natural laws? What's your relationship to, and not rushing to having a whole list, but starting with each one. The best one to always start with, I say, is cause and effect, because it can lead you into so many other laws without you having to understand. But just by looking at how am I the cause that's affecting my life? And we're not talking about it in a philosophical way where we're trying to say God and all of just like you, when you're deciding with your free will, what do you become? And then around whenever that person now, after you've gone through your rites of passage in adulthood, you're not eligible to have your own home, one, and secondly, to go marry. So there's rites of passages for you leaving home that must be performed. There's rites of passages that must be done when you go and get married. Like we discussed in the briefly when we were talking about what happens pre-conception, pre-pregnancy. Are the people going to marry, or the lobola situation? So yeah, lobola, and all the rites of passages that it comes with, because two people from two different cultures can be getting married. And one side will say, our list of things that we want from you as the groom's family is this, and the groom's family says to the bride's family, well, in our tradition, the list of things we want is that. And these are all things which are part of rites of passages. If you look at a wedding properly, there's all these different processes that are in there. And it differs from culture to culture, there's really no one size fits all, but there's those basic elements. The ancestors must be involved, living ancestors in terms of your grandparents and your uncles and aunts and your parents, where they need to be involved, and on one side, the other thing is obviously exchange of gifts. Lobola is not about buying someone, it's an honoring, it's an exchange, an honoring between, it's not the groom side of the family sends cows and the other side of the family does nothing. No, there's an exchange, so it's a way of social etiquette, of really getting to know each other, where everything is discussed openly. Where's the child coming from? What's this? And that's the whole point. The whole point of dowry is to build on the communication and a bridge, and to see if the families can communicate firstly. And when their families break down, how do they treat and respond to one another? Because everything is there is a constellation. But without going too in depth with it, there'll be those rites of passages where the marriages must take place, what beasts and the type of beasts and how many beasts and all of that would be discussed there. And the types of medicines, that one would be taught, to strengthen their marriage, and these would be the types of medicines which would be aphrodisiacs, right? So, and medicines that specifically pertain to keeping the womb or the prostate healthy, because the whole point of union is we want to see kids so we can see continuation, of the lineage, because it's a natural law that things must continue perpetually. So from there, after that, there'd be rites of passages for people who are going into elderhood, because there's that transition that happens in a person's life where they're leaving adulthood behind and they're stepping into elderhood, which is a position of overseeing the family. By this stage, you should have gone through your mbelegos. You should know, we should have had kids, so you should know exactly what the rites of passage that should be done for a child are. You should know then what should be done when a child hits puberty, when the child is turning now, is going into young adulthood, and when they reach adulthood. You should know what happens when a child needs to leave the house and move into and start their own home. You should know how to conduct lobola proceedings and negotiations and a marriage. And so this is why at this point, you're now being put in this position of the overseer over your family. And in there would be rites of passages that would need to be done for you, because you'd be ascending in a way to a position of If you're a woman, matriarchy, in your family, an actual matriarch. And if you're male, patriarchy, you'd be ascending to the point of patriarchy. And because you're ascending in this place, the processes you'd have to undergo would be processes that would help you ground, being open and receptive to the dreams that would be coming through from the ancestors. This person, once they step into that position, they really start to dream about what's happening with their children, their grandchildren, because they're being informed by the spirits of the family that, hey, that such and such a child needs such a thing. Hey, that one is pregnant. Hey, and that's why they have to go through processes which ground them in the reality of being an elder and what that means and their responsibility. And also in them, they'd have to go through processes of dealing with their trauma. And again, small psychoactive medicines, which are very good in processes like vision quests, and it's very good for healing, again, the trauma. Now, I say psychoactive medicines, and I know this is a very loose word, but there's the other words of it are like upuhlu, ubulawu, these are individual medicines individually without making them into a combination, which they'd call ubulawu or upuhlu, but individually. These plants, honorigens, will use English, so we can just move forward. Honorigens, as they call them. These are more dreaming medicines, but these are medicines that really have powerful detoxing actions on the body. Really, really powerful detoxing actions on the body. Then you'd have entheogens, the ones that take you into a trance. And be a combination of these medicines, which would be used, to help people deal with these issues, and move through when I say issues, the traumas that come at the stages. And then eventually we can get to, after that would be dying and death and afterlife. What you do when the person is dying, and that's usually about settling that person's account, and them making amends where they still need to make amends, fixing the situations that they still need to fix, taking responsibility for them, calling all the people who they know they need to say, I'm sorry, or calling all the people that they need to that accepting the people that they need to allow to say, I'm sorry to you for hurting me, so forgiveness can happen. So a lot of the rites of passage around dying are about releasing the person's soul. And this is where you hear about people who do a lot of death, we'll use that word, death doulas, who help people, prepare for the moment of death. And there are processes for that, setting up your will and estate. If you are fortunate enough, to have, to not die instantly from an accident, but to get sick and be dying, so you can actually sort out your account. It's actually in many ways to be old and sick and dying, to be like when you're really old now, it's time to go, and you don't go instantly. It's a blessing in many ways because you get it in many ways, not in every single situation, but in many situations. Because you get a chance to really sort out your things before you go, to really make things right, to teach your children what they need to know, to make sure the knowledge that needs to be passed on to the next generation is passed on, to appoint successors to carry that knowledge. These are all the things which would be sorted out before a person dies. At death, how the body is kept, where we take the person's body to, how we cleanse the body, who's the person that cleanses the body, how many days can the body stay above the ground or until it must be buried, where, all these things. This would be the death rites of passages, and it's more around the funeral and the days just before the person, from the days when the person died to the point when they get into the ground. Now, when they get into the ground, now there'd be a whole rites of passages at different stages to help the person in the I'll just put it simply, in them transitioning from this plane to heaven, so them going through their life review and sorting out what karma's left undone, and then what happens, like I say, over that time, the person in the family, that same person that's passed away, people will dream about him in the families, coming with different messages about things that still need to be completed and processes that need to be completed and things that are left undone, so that person can be liberated, then move on to Troamoya, and there'd be rites of passages done there, and that's why I say, ultimately, I'm going to say this, people need to be able to know it within their cultural context. because if it's the only person that's allowed, I really say, to not have to know it in their cultural context is a person who's an orphan, complete orphan, who doesn't actually know that, that person that gets taken, and gets thrown in a dustbin because people are in that behavior these days, and they run away. So no one knows who's the parent. That child is a person that can, so according to the high laws of Africa, the ancient laws, that if you lose your tribe, can get absorbed into another tribe. They can, it's simple, go to a chief, your con, and then ask them to be absorbed into his tribe. It's that simple. And then you'd be following those rites of passages, and that would be your blueprint. But everyone else, especially if your family's still alive, and you guys know what culture you belong to. If you don't know, if your family has lost the knowledge of how it's done in terms of your family traditions, then you just have to rely on the cultural knowledge, right? That in the culture, it's done this way. Basutus do it this way, Zulus do it this way, Vendas do it this way. You have to look at it, Tswanas do it this way within your cultural context, right? Because it's different processes. People use different things and go to different places. Some people circumcise, some don't. Some people use sheep, some people use goats, some people don't use any animals. So it's very important to know what's your culture. And you see, the thing is, it's not enough to say, no, these things are backward and I'm not going to do them. I'm going to say, for example, people like, we will not do the rites of passage into adulthood because there's genital mutilation. If that's a problem, remove the mutilation. I mean, why do you have to cancel the whole thing instead of removing the thing that needs to do? Just remove the thing that needs to develop it, and stop running away from the work that needs to be done. And finally, there's other rites of passages, like for becoming a healer, whether it's to be a priest, a prophet, a sandusi, whatever it is, a swami, a guru, those things. So there's all those series of rites of passages, and all of these things are to align you, ground you, put you back into yourself, into real, practical, lived life, because life is what you do, and it's not just what you think, it's really what you do in each moment. And this is how we lose it. We're thinking, and we're not paying attention to what we're doing, but we're thinking, and with our thinking, we justify a whole lot of things that leave us in tough predicaments. Marcus.
My God. Whoa, so much wisdom, so much information to process. And it's so illuminative because you took us through the very beginning, of preconception, and took us back to conception. So thank you so much for this wisdom, Mkhulu. Now, the question I have, also taking this time to open up Q&A for those who want to ask Mkhulu some questions, some follow-up, because you laid everything for us to see it. So if you want to do any follow-ups, you want to get an expansion on a specific thing, you may begin to share in the Q&A. So my question is, most people in modern times, we did not go through these rites of passages for a number of reasons, a lot of migration being a huge factor of that, and also colonization, and how this information is no longer as active in our culture and norms and our way of life. So some people do experience this, especially those who are in the rural areas, those who are still that are connected with the elders, the grandmothers and the grandfathers. You will go through this. But for most people, at some point, this stops happening, especially by adulthood. We don't usually have the rites of passages happening. So we might experience this when we are young, when we're still with our grandparents, if you live with your grandparents, but after a while, they are no longer there. So just expanding on one, how do we rectify and resurrect these rite of passages at the level in which we are currently at as the human race, as an African society. What can we do practically now? Because we are already adults. I am almost in my 30s. So some of the things you're talking about, I'm like, that 18 to 28, I was just by myself, doing the rite of passages by myself. So how do we rectify and resurrect, and how will this also, like, the importance of resurrecting this rite of passages, and how this will support us with our health, with our well-being, right? So I'm looking for the practical ways we can begin for everyone who's watching at the different ages that they're watching, and they want to, yeah, because it's through this rite of passages that we return to the natural laws, and that's how we'll be able to create these lives that we want, of health, of abundance, of communion, of connection, right? So it's, this is a way to that, to create the life you want. So yes, how do we rectify and resurrect?
So ultimately, I would say, it starts with creating good family relations and family bonds. It starts there, and spending time with our elders, and spending with time with our elders in the community, people who are respected for their grasp of this knowledge, that they actually know that this cool, this one, or that coco over there, or that guy over there, that woman over there, those people, they know the things how they done. So it's spending time with these type of people. I mean, we can spend so much time with our teachers in primary school and university, and employees that we and employers that we don't like, and colleagues that we don't like. We can spend so much time with those people. I'm sure we can spend some time with people in our communities who actually have this type of knowledge. On other side, it's also about using the internet. You know, you know, we're not at 94 anymore. We're in 2020. And we have to actually respect, and give a big shout out, a big round of applause to all the people, all the African people that have put their contribution, all of them, to the ones who are famous who wrote books, to those who just like commenting on forums, and all the people who create websites where the clan names of different cultural groups are captured. Sotho, Tswana, Zulu, Xhosa, there's different websites that I've seen which capture the clan names of people. And these are people making contributions, you know. So use the internet first, for example, right? Because you would be surprised what's on YouTube, how many documentaries there are out there, for each different type of culture, where they're showing you your rites of passages and how it's done. So we're not in 94 anymore. We're in 2020, so we have to also let go of that narrative that the information is not out there. There are so many people that really, with their own pocket and with their own time and effort and energy, went out there and did the effort and immortalized it on the internet for us to be able to recover our identity. So use the internet. Go buy books. There are books on these things. There are so many books. You have to find out where the bookstores are, but also if you also look on platforms like Facebook, again, there are many Pan-Africanist groups that you can search for which deal with books, books specifically that are from South Africa, about South African things, and about South African culture. There are books on these things, and people who create groups and they put links out there. So using the technology, for you, and instead of using it against you, so we have to be practical. The most practical thing is to actually do it. Once you found an elder that knows how it's done properly, speak with that elder to help you and to get this thing done for you. And then pay attention, record, write down, record it as a movie if you want, make it a documentary, your whole journey, because that will be an account that can be passed down from one generation to the next, and the next generation then can develop the rite of passage based on a written thing that they can see that, oh, it's done like this and it's done like that, and it's done like this because of this, and it's done like that because of that, and we in this family. Because like I said, many people don't know what are their things, and it's because they don't ask, another thing is, yes, it can be confusing if you don't know where to start. But like I say, you always want to start with a person in your community that you know knows these things. Also, speak to people who have gone through the rites of passage, people in your same culture. If your family doesn't know, you want to go speak to someone who has the same clan name as you, who's gone through the rites of passage, because you come from the same clan, and they've gone through the rites of passage. So they actually have the knowledge of it. And they have access to someone who does know them to know it. If they don't know, they know someone who does, who they can direct you to. So speak to people who've gone through rites of passages. The knowledge is always accessible because some of us are out and we've gone through our rites of passages. So it's about that. Also, the biggest thing that I'll say practically is people developing the courage. I'll say it now, it's the courage. The issue is courage. When it comes to rites of passage, it's courage. People developing the courage to go and do their rites of passages. Because many people, as I've seen, because of their identity crisis, they feel afraid to tap into their authentic African identity and do things in their own African way, because of the pressure of their families. That their families are like, we don't do this, because they forgot how it's done. Yeah, that's pressure. It puts big pressure on a person because now it's like, if the people that I trust and I'm hoping for support aren't helping me with this, what do I do then? That's the whole thing. Then the person, instead of dealing with it and pushing through and persevering and chipping at it one day at a time, just chipping at it and chiseling it, they run away from it, not because they want to, but because they feel overwhelmed and they feel lost for a solution. So it's also being able to confront the family and outgrow them and do it. If your family says no and you want to be in your identity, do it. Your family, they'll forgive you one day. You guys will work it out. And at the end of the day, you're being true. You're not like you're doing things that don't belong to you on you. Your rites of passages belong to you and you alone. Like no one can do them for you on your behalf. No one can do them for you on your behalf. Only you can do them. And they have no expiry date. And you can't you can't use another culture's things to replace your things. Because we're talking about your blood, your flesh, rites and passages. That's why you can't play the replacement game. And this is the thing. So it's about really getting into the practice of it and then confronting the families that are still ignorant about their identity and still afraid to be in their identity and understanding why they're afraid. It's not just making them enemies, but understanding how, because, when we are no longer stuck in that trap, we forget, once upon a time, we were just as afraid as our family of engaging rights. But because life can put you in such a tight corner, respect and humility for these things, you just find that, and you just find yourself wanting to do these things. So that's why I say these things are very important to engage, and it's a journey, a personal journey of healing for one's own self, of course.
Of course. Definitely. It's a mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional holistic process, because these traumas that we go through, whether that trauma of the psyche or trauma of the spirit or trauma of the body, they're so interconnected. And like we were talking in the beginning, you can't isolate and focus on one thing. Even when we are talking about why, for example, we might not be doing the rite of passage, we see how the block is existing mentally because it's an identity and a psychological um, conflict happening with the self, right? So when we are looking to heal, we're looking to be well, we have to look at all these other aspects, to look at the fear, where it originates from. There's also the part where the fear that you are carrying in your blood, in your DNA, is actually the fear of your ancestors who went through particular traumas in their history, in the past, that now you are carrying, and you find yourself having a particular response, fear, to aversion to these rites of passages or to particular experiences, because these are ancestral traumas that you are holding. And for us African people, our healing is that complex because our history is very muddled up with a lot of trauma that has happened to our ancestors. So we cannot like just eat well and not address also the mental and ancestral traumas that have happened in the past. So you definitely have to do this in a multi-dimensional, and of course the idea is not to overwhelm yourself, because it can be like, oh my god, I have to rectify all these things that Mkhulu just said, where do I begin? And you get overwhelmed. But the idea is to, you know, to just look at all the aspects and move each one bit by bit, and eventually you arrive to that holistic well-being. You know, if you are now currently able to do the mental healing of the fears, you do that, and then you add in the physical cleansings. Once you're able to do that, you add in the spiritual connection, which actually is like super important. If you can't do anything, do the spiritual connection, right? And connect spiritually with your divine self and with your ancestors and your guides, so that you can get that revelation and that guidance. And particularly because I know some people, and this is a question that you can expand on, that Komatiliso has, but some people, they don't have these rites of passages in the cultures, particularly say African in the diaspora, Black African Americans who were basically taken, and maybe the rite of passages got mixed and removed because of that programming, you know, that our people received through slavery and colonization. So another way to reclaim this, to resurrect this, is also through the spirit, because these are already archived in the Akashic field. So there's nothing like, oh, we lost it forever. We could never retrieve it because we're not in Africa, or I don't have people around me who can teach me this. There's always a way to retrieve this information, right? So this is the question that Matsiliso was asking, and I think you answered some part of it, but maybe you have a thing or two to add. So she was asking, what are the far-reaching implications of not following these rites of passages for a child who never knew his or her background, and for those who know their background, but they are ignoring these rites of passage, this information?
Well, I can say that it depends on like what's happening with that child in the economy. For example, some people, you know, they'll always bedwet until they do their rites of passages. They can't stop bedwetting until they actually get the rites of passage done. Another person will always find themselves in fights, constantly in fights, or constantly having a streak of bad luck that never, ever, ever wants to end. You know, other people, it's, so many things, nightmares for other people. They constantly have nightmares and dreams that they don't understand, which scare them and traumatize them. So then they end up with things like insomnia, you know, and then that leads to depression and melancholy, and then everything develops into something else that was not treated. You know, there's so many things, you know, some children, like, they keep having car accidents, or like, it's like so many, there's not one thing, one far-reaching complication, it's many. And that's just on one level. The real far-reaching one is that the next generation, you know, grows up with the same dynamics. That's the real far-reaching one, you know. And if it's not correct, then all the behavior is the problem. You see, when we, for example, we say that person that becomes a very violent person because of them not having done the rites of passage. For example, let's say that person was the bedwetter that never stopped bedwetting, you know, just because that bread, right? And then obviously that made them very angry towards the world and angry towards themselves and whatnot. So they're very abusive towards people, you know, and then they traumatize everyone in their family, and far-reaching consequences, because everything, like I say, is interrelated, you know. And then that passes on, that same anger passes on to the next generation, and someone else is born with that same bedwetting thing, then has to go through that same sense of shame and anger and you know. So the most far-reaching consequence is the cycle repeating itself and actually growing some muscle each time it comes around. It grows more muscle. You know, it's dangerous.
It mutates, yeah. Miasma, old stuck energy, we call it, right? So this ancestral miasma will move because these energies, they're moving through the DNA. And this is, I think, what we don't understand. Like, the DNA is holding the code for the family, for the lineage, for the bloodline. So if the current person did not go through the rite of passage, that DNA will carry the codes of that experiences, which includes all these things you're talking about, the anger, the self-hatred, and. And then when they give birth to a child, that DNA is the one that's given to the child, and the child will have these predispositions like their father. And this is the idea where the idea of like the sins of the father becomes the sins of the children, you know, the sins of the mother becomes the sins of the children. It's because it's held in the DNA, and it's not a mental thing. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna stop myself from being an angry person. If the energy was solid and it's held in the DNA, particularly if it's, you know, its origin is very, you know, active, it will be active with the child. And then we have a cycle of patterns of issues that we find right now in African societies. And we want to say, oh, there's an uproar of domestic violence, an uproar of fathers leaving their children. And it's like, actually, this has its origin in the ancestral experiences, in the fact that our people went through some traumas with slavery and colonization, that the men were actually removed from the family system. So now you see these boys, young boys, leaving their children. You're like, oh, why are they doing that? And it's like, it's literally the DNA is coded that it does that. You know, so to do holistic healthcare, I mean, I say this all the time to those who follow me, that we need to do DNA regeneration. We need to regenerate the DNA, cleanse out that stuck energy, that miasma energy. And like Mkhulu was saying, there are many ways of doing it, but the first thing that we need to come into understanding as African people is the issues we're seeing in our lives. Because sometimes you hear these conversations, you're like, oh, this is so nice what Mkhulu and Kokojo are talking about, but it's not relevant to me. And it's like, it is actually your life right now, as you are living it, as you're experiencing it, with the experiences you are currently having. They are not isolated from what we're talking about. In fact, they originate from what we're talking about, which is the natural laws and the rite of passage is being lost and distorted and removed from our African societies. And now we're having these experiences where, you know, we talk about alcohol addictions, drug abuse, we're talking about absent fathers, we're talking about like Black men, you know, incarcerated, we're talking about like all these issues that are throughout the Black community, whether we're here in Africa or in the diaspora. Of course, it's a different per land, but the issues are repeating because the traumas are the same, the origins are the same, right? So this conversation is so exciting to me because this is what I work with, the DNA regeneration, and how you, when you're talking about health, it's not just about going to the gym and eating plant-based medicine food. That's great, that's wonderful, you're doing great. But there are other elements as well that you need to move, because you are not alone. It's not about your body alone. It's about the body and the DNA it's holding, which is the ancestral code. Yeah.
100%, Coco.
Yeah.
And it's so important to like keep good care on that. You know, like I say, people need to be able to, we have to keep healthy body, you know, healthy diet. Healthy body is a healthy diet. A healthy diet is a diet in the right food combinations and eating the correct foods, you know, and not eating highly acidic foods.
Yeah.
Everyone's diet should consist of at least 30% of at least 70% alkaline food and 30% acidic. You know, we do need to exercise. Everyone does need to exercise. You know, everyone does need to find their expression, their creative expression. You know, because those are other things we didn't talk about. The creative expression part is very important. You know, and also choosing a career that gives their calling. Everyone's got a calling. Every single person's a calling, and everyone's born with ancestors and is being directed by ancestors. Everyone's born with at least 100,000 ancestors who will tend to all the different areas of your life when you get to those different areas of your life. They all interchange at different stages, you know. So it's like people need to be in careers which give expression to who they are, their nature, you know. So healthcare is also about that. You know, if you're in a job that you don't like, you are not gonna get any better anytime soon. You're gonna die inside first. That's where you die, and then the body follows because we just try and compensate and we start, you know. So it's always about keeping that balance. You know, I would love to talk more about like diet and all of that, but that's another hour and a half conversation. You know, but I'll say, you know, as long as people keep it clean, you know, monthly cleansing. Our ancestors believed in monthly cleansing. Every month, you know, you should at least have spaded twice, or palazai two, or futa every week. Every week, yeah, at least guy one. You know, you have to steam every week at least one time. You know, do an enema at least twice a month or once a month, go for a colonic, you know, proper colonic where they just pull it all out. You know, these are all important things that people need to get into because food is also the cause of sickness, you know, even if eating healthy food, you know, because I've seen a lot of people don't combine their food properly, right? So the food gets into the intestines, putrefaction, meaning rotting happens because you combine two things that don't combine. So they're just causing rot. And that becomes then a poison to the bloodstream and it increases your acidity levels, which starts to cause inflammation in your body, and then the body needs to use lymphatic fluids to bring down the inflammation, and then you get congestion, and it's a cycle, you know. So that's why I said, like, yeah, you know, you have to keep cleansing once a month at least. Keep it out, get it out, get it out, you know. And I would say, yeah, eating the correct food combination. It's so basic. Life wasn't made to be hard. You don't see goats and I'm saying goats. You don't see lions and like cheetahs and like buffaloes and like kangaroos or fishes and whales having to read and study how to eat. You know, they eat according to their genome, you know, the type of species they are. You know, so we are marsupials. Human beings are marsupials. Same thing as a monkey. Same monkey family, one family. You know, and they are frugivores. That means we are frugivores, right? Look at the gorilla. It does not eat an ounce of meat. It just eats vegetables, but mainly it's a high fruit diet, vegetables in terms of herbs, you know, medicinal herbs that it eats, roots, tubers, you know, seeds and nuts of certain things. You know, it doesn't eat meat, you know, but it's got the highest expression, you know, of the genome. The gorilla has a higher expression of the genome than we do, of the marsupial genome than we do. We've just got like, apparently, we've got the better brain. Apparently, which is questionable if we can't even eat according to our genome. You know. So I'll say that, you know, eat according to your genome. If you now wanting to go vegan, don't go vegan and then you now got vegan substitutes because all these substitutes are made from things like soy, which cause mucus plug in your gut, which then is the same as just stick to eating meat. If you're gonna eat soy, if you're saying you're going vegetarian or you're going even eating soy, just you should have just stuck with the meat, you know, because the exact same amount of damage is being done by that soy that meat was doing in the first place. You know, so I'd always say to people, you know, soy is not a cop out, it's not an easy way out. You know, it's just making it just as worse. You know, and the worst thing about soy is once it's in your intestines, it takes on a gooey, like glue-like form. You know, it's a really bad and congesting. And the body is an air gas machine, you know, an elastic air gas machine. Our skin is elastic. It has to expand and contract. expand and contract. If you lose, your body loses the ability to expand and contract because of congestion, that's when you start having all sorts of diseases settling in, because now there's no contraction and expansion, so the wastes are not moving out, and being dispersed out of the body. So that's why I say these things are very important to watch. What you eat, soya is not an alternative. Stick to meat. Just stick to meat then. Stick to meat. Eating the correct food combination ultimately is what you need to do. Correct food combination, correct nutritional guide, and cleanse. If you can do these three things, you'll be fine. You'll see a great improvement in your overall diet. Of course. And your overall health, not diet, in your overall health and well-being. Many things can be corrected just from correcting your diet. People will be surprised how many health complaints get corrected just from correcting the diet and the cleansing.
Yeah. Okay. So that was actually Gogo Tusa's question. She or he was asking, should we as Africans be eating meat? I think you covered that. So we'll go to the last question.
Can I just say on the meat though?
Okay.
Pardon? On the meat, I will say, if you want to eat meat, go buy meat in the rural areas. Go buy a cow, or is it a goat or a sheep, whatever you want to eat. Why I say that? Because those animals, right, they don't get injected with all these hormones. The problem with meat and milk, with meat, let me just to say, with meat, milk, is the hormones in the stuff, because the animal had to be injected with growth hormones. All of these, which will imbalance your hormones and take you out of your biorhythms when serotonin is supposed to be secreted, when melatonin is supposed to be secreted, when endorphins are supposed to be secreted, when adrenaline is supposed to be secreted, when estrogen is supposed to be secreted, testosterone, it will change and affect all of that in your body. So that's the only problem with eating meat that you buy from the shops. So you must go always and go get your meat there in the rural areas where people don't use injections to grow their animals. And go, I know the meat has got a hard bone, but that tells you it's healthy. You go buy umleqwa, it's hard bone, it's hard bone. We call it a hard body for a reason. It's tough. Even the meat, you can feel that it's tough, it's alive, it tastes different, it's more richer. But you want to eat meat that is not injected, so I'd firstly say that with meat. And secondly, when you eat meat, eat it in the correct food combination. Eat meat with what it combines with. Don't eat it with things it doesn't combine with. You can't eat meat with sugar, so why would we be putting tomato sauce on top of meat or barbecue sauce on top of meat? Because these things already have sugar. So already when it gets to your intestines, when it gets to your stomach and starts digesting, getting to your intestines, it's already now a bad food combination, poison that's poisoning your bloodstream and increasing your acidity levels. So that's why I say meat is about eating it clean and with the correct food combinations. Only eating it with the things it combines with. Get yourself a food combining chart. It's for free online. You just can download them. You can just go into Google Images and type in food combining chart, and you'll get one right there waiting. So that's what I'll just say about meat. Marcus.
Okay, one last question by Gogo Ketiwe. She's saying, Togoza Mkhulu, what does it take to prepare for umbilical? I hope I'm pronouncing that well. I hope you understand. For a 7-year-old girl child, how long does it take, and who in the family is needed to perform it? Can a mother do it on her own, or does the father have to be involved?
So Marcus, I'd say hi, Coco. For Mbelego, again, it's about how's it done in your tradition. You start there. So firstly, you always go to your elders. It can be the mother can't do it on her own. If she's at an island, she has no one with her. She has no aunts, she has no uncles, no grandparents, so she's alone. She has no one. Like we said, the case of then these people exist. People who had to grow up on the streets, they were thrown out onto the streets. They had to grow up on the streets. They never had any parents, and they still don't know what family they belong to because they were orphaned, thrown in the dustbin at birth. and then thrown away by orphans that's promised to take care of them. There's many people like that. There's many, many people like that. So like I say, if you don't know how it's done, you start with going to consult your elders. Always start there, because amongst one of them will know how it's done in your family. In every family, there's one part that's Christian and there's one part that is traditional. And you want to go and find out who amongst your elders is traditional. And that's who you want to go and start and speak with, because there's no one size fits all. In your culture, some cultures, they do the Belogo a few days, a few weeks after the
May
child
I
is
ask
born.
what is it in English? Because
So in English, I can only give you an equivalent using the Christian system, like a baptism, and then the
okay.
rite of passage into adulthood, in terms of if you're trying to compare it with Christianity, would be confirmation, when you go from a child into adulthood, So, but I'd say, again, with it depends on your culture. Some cultures do it a few weeks after the child is born, others and most do it when the child is conscious, it's around 7 years old. How long it takes, it depends on your culture also. It can be a thing that's done over one day. The family comes, the animals are slaughtered, the ancestors are called upon, and it's not something like going to the mountains, where you have to be gone away for an extended time to go learn things about adulthood. It's usually a simple ceremony. I'm just going to give you a basic structure. It's like usually a simple ceremony that involves one part, your elders, so you, the parents, being there, if it's possible. And it's the only person that can perform it, right, is the family that the child belongs to. Going back to that issue we spoke about earlier on if the child is born outside of wedlock, right, then that child is the responsibility of the mother's family, unless the father's family goes and lobolas that child, right? If the child is born in wedlock, it's the father's child, the father's family's responsibility. The mother's family just comes just to say, yes, we're here, to acknowledge that the ceremony is happening and to participate, but the people who are responsible for ensuring it's done will always be the father's side. So in terms of that, like I say again, it's about whether your children are born in wedlock or not, whether the children have been lobolad or not. A child that's born in wedlock is already lobolad because the mother's lobolad, right? Some cultures is different also, again, in terms of it's differences in some cultures. But I say again, a woman that is married is mam lobolila, we hope, right? And that the rites of passages have been done, because that wedding of signing, and the traditional wedding are two different things in terms of your ancestors, and your rites of passages. Because according to rites of passages, only adults can marry. So two children can't even marry. You have to have gone through your own rites of passages. So you wouldn't have, it's like, how then would your marriage would become voidable, being able to be annulled? And then does that affect the kids? That's a good question to ask. Different cultures have different processes. But then again, it's usually a one-day process where we come, we acknowledge, we slaughter an animal for the child, there's a celebration done. Before we slaughter, I say again, we invoke the ancestors to acknowledge what we're doing, that we're doing this process for this child, to be with the child and to introduce the child and to give thanks for them looking after the child. But usually before you perform Mbelego, you'd want to first start observing the behavior of your child. This is one thing I will say. Behaving the behavior of your child, to see, is the child conscious? Usually people will say, okay, I'll do a Mbelego. We'll start saying, I'll do the Mbelego at 7, and they'll only do the Mbelego at 10 years old, because for 3 years, some people want to observe, what's the child's behavior like? Is this child showing signs where they need rites of passages from both the father's side and the mother's side? These things are very important. So a lot of the time, when we say time, it's also observing the child, from the point when you say, okay, now my child's ready to do Mbelego, let me observe. So it's different things, differences in cultural groups, differences, But like I say, it's usually a one-day process, that doesn't take too long, and yeah, that's what I'll say in answer to that. Makosi Koko.
Mkhulu. Thank you so much, Mkhulu. Oh my God, this has been such an education. And I usually know this is an education, new information when the audience is like processing. As our guests have been doing today, we are processing and we're looking at how we can begin to bring this back into our lives. So thank you so much for your teachings, for taking us
Of
through that
course.
whole process. It's really helpful and it makes us understand how we can have a better, healthy, holistic life and what we can begin to include, shift, remove, add, and. So thank you so much, Mkhulu, for
Makosi
today.
Koko.
Of course.
Thank you
So
for the
now,
invite. It was fun.
yeah,
Amazing.
thank you.
We
Same
give
here.
thanks.
Yes.
Of
So
course.
now, just sharing a little bit on like for those who would like to connect, learn more, work with you, how they can do that, how you work, what kind of offerings do you have available if you do.
Well, so I'm a herbalist, and a psychiatrist, you know. So I usually counsel people. You can find me on my Facebook page and on my website, itongohealthandwellness.com. On Facebook, it's Itongo Health and Wellness. You can also catch me on Instagram. Just type in Itongo Health and Wellness. Itongo, Ithongo. That's how we spell Itongo. And it's different for different spelling to people. My offerings are, like I say, counseling, consultations, detoxes, um, ceremonies, from some of these using the origins, the ubulaos, and others using the entheogens, yeah, and that's about it in a nutshell, eh?
So
Of
that a
course,
person have to go to
yeah.
you. So a person has to come to you to be able to work with you, or how
No,
does it work?
people don't have to actually come to me. We are in the 20, we said it again, this is 2020. There's Zoom, there's WhatsApp calls, we can always do it on digitally. Right now I'm in the process of completing the curriculum that I'll be offering, on herbalism and on detoxing, so I'm almost done with that. We should be starting our first classes by next year, around about March. It's been a whole lot of hard work. Yes. But thank God, it's done. Yeah, but that's what I'm offering, that's what I do. And we do it remotely. For example, with the stuff that we'll be doing online, the courses will be online courses, that people can do from the comfort of their homes, because not everyone can come in, to sit for a class and we go through each one. People are working, people don't live as flexible lives. Some people are in different provinces, some are up across the sea. So some of the courses will be online, some of the classes will be online, you know. But yeah, that's what I do, Marcos.
Okay, that's amazing. And so, for everyone who joined us through the Warriors of Light page, when you go under our speakers where Mkhulu's picture is, when you click learn more, it will take you to his website. So you can begin there if you didn't hear the name. And his name, you can just take that and search for it on Facebook or on Instagram and follow him there. So
Marcos.
thank you so much, Mkhulu. Thank you everyone for joining us today on this edition of Warriors of Light Show, this masterclass series. We were supposed to have one more episode, but we actually have two more because we just want to wrap all this right and properly. So we are going to have an episode coming this Friday and next week Tuesday. So same time, 5 p.m. We're here on Zoom. We're also on Facebook, and we are also on YouTube and Podbean. The replays will be on YouTube and Podbean. So you should be able to watch this episode again and listen to it on Podbean with Mkhulu from tomorrow, and we will share with you. If you shared your email, we'll be able to send that to you via email. If not, we'll also just share the links and you can go check them out on other platforms. We are really hoping to share this knowledge, really important knowledge, in as many platforms as possible. So we really appreciate you showing up and being here, asking your questions, as well as the shares that you are doing and inviting people that you believe will learn and benefit from this information. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and have a great day, everyone. Before I close, yes, okay.
God bless.
Thank you for you, Mkhulu.
Makhosi
From
wokhokho,
everyone.
makhosi.
Okay. Good night, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. Okay. Bye.